So we're at the time of year when you're getting 1099s in the mail for income that you earned as a contractor. And sometimes the information on them can be wrong. In fact, it's far more common than you think. So on today's episode, I'm going to tell you exactly what you should do if this happens to you, because it doesn't have to be the nightmare that it might feel like, or that it can become if things go wrong. Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for self-employed people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, tax pro, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're a creative or soul-centered entrepreneur or wellness practitioner who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello, beautiful. Welcome. Today, I want to talk to you about correcting a 1099. So we're at the time of year when you're getting 1099s in the mail for income that you earned as a contractor. And sometimes the information on them can be wrong. In fact, it's far more common than you think. So on today's episode, I'm going to tell you exactly what you should do if this happens to you, because it doesn't have to be the nightmare that it might feel like, or that it can become if things go wrong. But first, I want to just take a little side trip to tell you about a special event that's coming up. If you've been listening to this podcast, you probably have heard me mention that I'm writing a book and I got a really amazing book deal. And if you've been wondering how I got a book deal, I have a hot tip for you. One of the things that I did to get it was, like an artist, do all the research about the industry that would give me the best insight about what a good book proposal would look like, what the requirements of that are, who sends it, who it gets sent to, what they're looking for, what makes it a juicy one. And also just how the industry itself works, right? Knowing that stuff is just one, it's great for setting your mindset because writing a book is no small deal. And the writing of the book is actually only part one, right? Or is only one part of the journey. The beginning part of the journey is finding an agent. The next part of the journey is writing a book proposal. For me, I spent 8 months on that process in order to really, really nail it. And then you write the book, and then it's not over, right? After you write the book, then publicizing that book and getting it on shelves, getting the media appearances and attention that you need to actually make the sales of the book that make it worthwhile for your publisher and make that publisher really excited to give you the next book. These are all really hard parts of the process. So to me, getting to really understand what that process looks like, soup to nuts, was critically important, both for just setting my expectations of how big a project this is, but also how to do the best job I possibly could do. So if you're curious how I did that research and how I got so much insider knowledge, as well as connections within the industry, which, let's face it, they're important. I attended a conference called Book to Brand, which is hosted by a really wonderful now friend, Farnoosh Torabi. She's a personal finance journalist and author, and she's a wonderful person. She's very, very transparent, and she is hosting a conference on March 7th in New York City, and tickets are available now. And I encourage you to check it out, see what it takes. I will also say that if you look at the price of the conference and you feel a little lump in your throat about it, I just want to tell you that your spidey sense might be saying, now's not the time for you to write a book. Because in fact, this is only one of probably many moments like that. Hiring a publicist is going to feel like that. Taking the time out of your paying work in order to write a book is going to feel like that. There's a lot of money that goes into writing a book, and you might not be in the position to do it. So if money is super, super tight and that's a top concern, I really think it's a good idea to do some of the background research about the process of writing a book and really understand what you're getting into. Because if a couple $1,000s up front feels like a lot of money to you, I'm going to warn you, it's not the last time you're going to face a decision like that. But what I want to say is, if you do feel ready, if you want to start the journey, you want to get educated, and you're also willing to make the investment in a position to make some investment in it, as well as to get in the room with the people, the agents, the publishers, the people from the publishing industry. If you want to get in that room and you want to learn how the sausage is made, this conference is the way to do it. I really love Farnoosh. I learned so much about her, and I credit my book deal in part to the stuff that I learned from her. Specifically, I nailed my book proposal, and it was because of Farnoosh and what I learned from her about writing a good book proposal. So if you're interested in that, that event is March 7th. P.S. It's for nonfiction authors. So it's not if you're writing the next great American novel. It's not for fiction. It's only for nonfiction. But if you're interested in writing a book, if you think you have a book in you, this is a really great conference. I've done it and I really recommend it. So I'm going to put the link to that in my show notes because this conference is coming up and I think it could really benefit you if you have ever considered writing a nonfiction book or are interested in what it takes to get a book deal. All right. So with that said, let's jump in to what to do if you get a 1099 reporting income that is wrong. All right. Let's jump in. So this is the time of year that you're getting 1099s in the door. All right. They are due if you have paid anybody who's not an employee. So in the course of, who does service for your business and you paid them over $600, then by January 31st, you have to issue that person a 1099 NEC. Important note, NEC stands for non-employee compensation. So by definition, this is not an employee, right? If they're on payroll, this is irrelevant to you. That's a W-2 that you will be issuing. But if it's a contractor, then you owe them a 1099 NEC. So of course, you owe these, and we're past the deadline now, so you're late. P.S. If you are suddenly realizing that you were supposed to file some 1099s and you didn't, I do have a course available on those. If you go to my website, sunlighttax.com, you can find a link to the course or just reach out to me on Instagram and I'll send that to you. The penalties are daily and they're per 1099 that you didn't send out but were required to. So beware. And those penalties ramp up and up and up as time passes. So there's a 30-day penalty if you get them in within 30 days. So just whoopsie, I'm a little bit late. Those penalties increase when you're 60 days late. And then after 180 days late, they triple. So be really aware that this requirement does not go away because you didn't issue the 1099. The penalties get worse and worse and worse. All right, so you need to issue your 1099s. Hopefully you did all that by the deadline on January 31st. And now we're talking about being on the receiving end of those 1099s, okay? So those are probably coming in the door. And yeah, you might get some that are late. That also happens. We do live in a world and do taxes in a world where people are human, which PS is the title of my book, Taxes for Humans. So you're probably getting these 1099s in the door, and a best practice when you receive a 1099, honestly, any tax document, but here we'll talk about 1099s. I want you to just take a look at it, right? The things you want to check when you get a 1099 are that your name is correct, right? You want your full legal name on that 1099. That's important. You also want to check that your social security number or tax ID number on that 1099 is also correct. I've absolutely seen it where people issue a 1099 to somebody and they just like have a little dyslexic moment and they reverse 2 digits in the social security number. Well, that's a really big deal. That is not going to get reported correctly and it's going to cause you major headaches. You need to get that corrected. Okay. Same as if your name is wrong. And the third piece of information that is critically important is how much they paid you, right? This one's probably a little more obvious to you, but of course I have seen 1099s where a person issues my client a 1099 and they put an extra 0 on the amount that they paid them, right? So they paid you $1,000, but they report that they paid you $10,000. Well, the problem with that, my friends, is that if you get that 1099, the IRS has its own copy of it and you are on the hook for paying the taxes on $9,000 you never received, right? So you need that corrected. The other thing that can be wrong on a 1099, and of course, you won't see this if it happens, is that the person who issued it might issue it to an old address of yours, right? If they issue the 1099 and the address is the one you put on the W-9 form, the information form that you filled out for them, and you didn't update your address with them when you moved, for example, well, you're not actually going to know that they got the address wrong because you're never going to get that 1099. But the bad part here is that the IRS will get their copy. And so that's a dangerous scenario, which is why also if you're expecting a 1099 from someone and you don't receive it, it is always, always, always worth a phone call. Get in touch with that person and just confirm, did you or didn't you send me a 1099? Because you want to know if they did and it went to your old address. Okay, super important. All right. So what do you want to do if, let's say you do see a mistake on that 1099? And again, this is probably the most frequently wrong tax document of all the tax documents that exist, which is why I'm making this episode for you. If you see a mistake on your 1099, what should you do? All right, well, the very first thing to do is gather the correct information, okay? So maybe the amount that the person reports that they paid you does not match your books at all, right? Maybe they're saying that they reported, that they paid you $12,000, but your books say that they paid you $9,000, right? A discrepancy like that is a big deal because you are on the hook to report and the IRS will receive the copy of the report of that income, whether it's correct or not, right? They will assume that it's correct unless you do something about it. So you want to gather the info. What is the correct amount that they paid? And of course, your full legal name and your social security number or tax ID number. You want to be sure you have those all lined up. You want to contact the person or organization who issued you the 1099. And what you want to tell them is that they need to issue you a corrected 1099. This is not a terrible process. It's not actually very hard to issue a corrected 1099, but here's the nightmare scenario you want to avoid. You absolutely need to make sure that they check the box that is marked corrected. If they don't do that, what they're doing when they think they're issuing you a corrected 1099, if they haven't checked that box, what they're doing is actually just issuing you an additional 1099. And that income will be added to whatever income they reported on the first one. Okay. So now you have increased your problem. And now you actually need two corrected 1099s. Okay. This can get ugly really quickly. So this is something not to miss. What my recommendation here is do not leave any room for error, right? If you're contacting someone because there's a mistake on your 1099, assume that there's another mistake coming unless you steer the ship, okay? So you want to be very explicit with them. You can point to me or this episode if you want to, and you can say, I need you to issue me a corrected 1099, and that means you need to change this incorrect information to this correct information, and you need to be 100% sure you check the box mark corrected, okay? That's what you do, all right? And if you do that, all they have to do is either go back to the accountant that they worked with in order to issue that 1099 in the first place, or go back to the software that they used to issue that 1099. Or I hope they didn't do this, but sometimes people still get the paper forms from the library and fill it out by hand. That makes me really nervous because there's no backup in that situation and mistakes are much easier to happen there, but they can also do a paper correction too. So it's a pretty easy process. It's not a huge deal for somebody to issue a corrected 1099 for you. And it is absolutely critical. It is not something you can just deal with and let them have issued you a bad 1099. All right. So super, super important. I just recommend you give them all that info. Here's what I need corrected. This was the incorrect info you put there. This is what it should be. And I need you to put this. And then please be sure to check the box corrected. All right. That's the basics. A source of confusion that is really, really common that I'm going to bring up in the course of this conversation when it comes to a discrepancy on the amount that someone paid you, a really common misunderstanding about a discrepancy in the payment amount is about reimbursed expenses. So let's just get super clear on what the rules are on reimbursed expenses, because a lot of times it's possible for the person who issued the 1099 to you to not know those rules, or for you to not know those rules and to think your 1099 is wrong when it's actually correct. Okay. So here's what the rules are when someone not just paid you for your work, but also reimbursed expenses that you incurred for that work. Okay. Now, the IRS has two different ways to split this. Okay. There's one way, which is called an accountable plan. So if the person paying has something called an accountable plan, this means they require you to show them receipts for the items they're going to reimburse. That's an accountable plan. And that means they're allowed to issue a 1099 where the only thing they report as income to you is what they paid you for the service. And they don't need to report any of that reimbursement on the 1099. Okay. So that's the rule. If you were not required to show receipts, that means that person who paid you does not have what is called an accountable plan. And under the IRS rules, that means they have to, by law, report their reimbursement to you as income. So they will add the reimbursement plus the payment together and report it as income to you. Okay. Now, a lot of people see this and they freak out and they feel, here's the thing. It's okay. You can work it out no matter which way you get your 1099. Here's the difference. If you get a 1099 issued and the person has an accountable plan and the reimbursement is not stated on the 1099 as income to you, that's great. You report that 1099 income as income, but also you don't get to report the expense as an expense on your Schedule C. Why? Because you didn't actually incur the expense if you were reimbursed for it. Okay. So in other words, that 1099 you got under an accountable plan is already doing that math for you. They're already zeroing it out. Okay. So you do not get to double count an expense that you were reimbursed for. All right. On the flip side, if someone issues you a 1099 and their reimbursement to you is lumped in with the payment, and that's fine, that person can't get around the law, right? So they have to do it that way. Well, in that case, you were not reimbursed for that expense on the 1099. And what you do to zero it out on your tax return so you don't end up paying taxes on that reimbursement is you simply list the expense, right? So you do, in that case, list the expense you incurred on your Schedule C. Okay. That way, the over-reporting of income you're getting on that 1099 will be canceled out because you report the corresponding expense you incurred on your Schedule C. Do you see? So the check and balance here is if you get the reimbursement reported to you as income, you do nothing. You just report it and you don't get to take the expense. If they report that reimbursement as income to you, you do get to take the expense and you do want to list it. All right. There's the difference. Okay. So be sure you know that rule before you call them in a panic and say, oh, this reporting number is incorrect. I need a corrected 1099, because they're not wrong and they are following the law if they don't require receipts, if they don't have an accountable plan, and they issue you a 1099 with that reimbursement listed on it. Okay. And then lastly, I want to clarify one other thing, which is about galleries. So if you exist in the art world, what I want you to know is that your gallery, if you make art sales through a gallery, that gallery does not owe you a 1099 for the art sales. Okay. Now, why is this? What's important to know is that 1099s report payments made for service rendered to a business. Now, do you answer phones for that gallery? Do you do art installation for that gallery? Okay, fine. The gallery does owe you a 1099 in that case. But did they sell your art? That, my friend, that counts as merchandise. Your art in their gallery counts as the gallery's merchandise. There is an exception under the tax code. It's very clear, actually, in the 1099 instructions that you don't issue a 1099 for sales of merchandise. And that, my friends, is why a gallery does not owe you a 1099 for art sales. Now, here's the thing. A lot of galleries don't really know that. And they go ahead and they issue 1099s to all their artists. This is wrong, but you know what? It's actually no biggie because you, by law, have to be reporting that income no matter what. And so the only thing you have to do is just You just report the income. And instead of reporting it as income that was not reported on a 1099, you're going to report it as income that was reported on a 1099. That is the only difference. Either way, you're on the hook for reporting that income. So it kind of makes no difference to you, which is why it's not really such a big deal. But I just wanted to be here as the tax person to tell you the technically correct answer. All right. And also for any gallerist who's listening and is like, oh my God, I've been issuing 1099s and they're wrong and I feel so bad. I just want to also be here for you galleries and say, you know what? If you're a gallery who's issued 1099s to artists when you didn't need to, you're probably an extra conscientious person really trying to do the right thing. So don't worry about it. It's really no harm, no foul. I just want you to be aware of what the rules actually are. That's all I've got for you today. I hope that clarifies some things that might have been confusing you about 1099s and also how to get them corrected if they're really, really wrong. So I hope that helps you. And also remember, all of you aspiring nonfiction authors out there, if you are interested, click the link in my show notes to check out Farnoosh Torabi's Book to Brand conference in New York City on March 7th. It is a really valuable space where you get to meet industry insiders and really learn how the industry works. It's a very valuable, very cool conference. And I really do attribute the excellence of my book proposal to learning from Farnoosh really what a publisher is looking for when they read your book proposal. So check that link out in the show notes, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. It really helps, and share it with a friend. I'm so grateful. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links we reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.